And then we have this guy here, right? So one of those emails I got was, I got this, important scoop. Please give me a call. And I'm like, I'll get to that later. So a month or two, I do get to it. And he says, I said, just tell me. He says, no, you have to call me. Just tell me. Call me. Oh, okay, I'll call him. And lo and behold, it was that millionth rock. And this guy's name is Cyrus Eugene Akers. He was the chief of security at the Air Force's most secure base, their intelligence division, called Special Operations, Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico. Now, Bill Casey, the first whistleblower who came to me, I had to pull out my own archives of his interview from 20 years ago. He said the whole faking of it was supervised by the United States Air Force. Well, as this guy was dying, he wants to get right with God. He's hours or a day or so away from dying, and he's fearing the judgment of God. And the Bible, as best as we can tell, says if you renounce your sin, confess it, and agree not to do it again, you are forgiven, even of murder. So his son is there, who was my source, and the first thing he says is that he killed somebody, wanted to get that off his chest. And his son says, who? He says, well, a coworker at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968. So the son is like, this is serious. He brings in the military police to investigate it. His father wasn't too pleased about that, but they interviewed him. The son's there during the interview, and he says, yeah, I killed so-and-so. Who knows what they said to his family? He disappeared, a crane fell on him, or who knows what. But the son wanted to give the victim's family closure. And then the military police asked him, well, why did you kill him? And he said, well, they filmed the fake moon landing here, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. They made a fake lunar set, brought in the lunar module, and that's where the TV images were filmed. My friend and I eyewitnessed it. He thought it was morally wrong. He was going to go public with him. I killed it to keep it a secret. The guy was given a list of 15 names by President Johnson. Curiously wanted to show up the first of 3 days of filming. So the faking of the moon landing was actually arranged by President Johnson. And I believe this is why he didn't run for re-election when he was eligible, because the next term would be the faking of the moon landing, and who knew that would work? What if the truth came out? In fact, Nixon was so afraid that the truth might come out 6 months into his presidency that he didn't show up for the lunch. He didn't want a picture of him shaking Neil Armstrong's hand with a smile and it unraveling later. The president of Japan is there, of Germany, of France, but not the president of the United States. He shows up for the second launch once they got away with it. And so he saved that list as a souvenir. And if you want to play the clip, Ryan, D2, the video, and
going to school with long sleeve shirts on to hide the purple welts. You did not lie in our house, that's for sure. Dad had a really bad attitude towards lying. Excuse me again. Okay. Anyway, this is the story that my dad told me on his deathbed. Project Slam Dunk was the name of this. President Johnson in 1968. Okay. In Cannon Air Force Base in 1968, he said by the time he got there, that there was already 2 large hangars that were connected. There was hundreds of dump trucks that came in and dumped sand and stone, and cement powder was powdered over the top of all that to make it look like a lunar landscape. They had men that fashioned it into a lunar landscape, he said. Okay, I've never known my dad to lie, so this all took me by surprise. What's that all about? So anyway, he said that in front of the airplane hangars was pole framing with large canvas tents that was concealing the inside of the staging area. Inside the staging area, on flatbed trucks, was uncrated the lunar lander that was assembled reassembled back inside the hangars. All of the walls were painted flat black, and the ceilings as well. He was sworn to secrecy by the NSA, and they would put him in prison for breaking that oath. And when Dad saw the moon landing on TV, he cried. He said he knew that what he had witnessed on TV was exactly what they recorded in that hangar. There was no reason for them to go flying around and everything. They had detailed high-definition photos of the landing area. There was no reason for them to go flying around to a different landing area that almost exhausted their fuel, except for drama, because everything had gone so smoothly. Nothing, so it had to be something. Anyway, Dad was one of 3 guards that guarded the inside of the front entrance. There was a list of 15 people who could enter. No one else was allowed by order of President Johnson. And here is that list. And I gave it to Bart Sibrel as well. And he checked out a lot of these names, and he says he can verify a lot of these people and what they do. And I come across a couple myself. Anyway, President Johnson, Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin, Werner von Braun, Robert Emenegger, Gene Kranz, James Webb, Joe Kerwin, Dr. Thomas Paine, Glenn Looney, Dr. Christopher Kraft, Dr. James Van Allen, General Trudeau, Lieutenant Colonel Donald Simon, and Grant Norrie. My dad, he raised me by the book. I know he didn't lie to me. And as I started seeing more and more of what he was telling me was true, I realized my dad wasn't lying.
So I said to General, as how I addressed him, to remind people of the military implications here. Either you're lying or he's lying. Is a general with top secret clearance lying who admitted he would lie to his own wife and children to serve the corrupt federal government? Or is a sergeant on his deathbed who's confessing to murder lying? A court considers eyewitness testimony extremely strong and a deathbed confession twice as strong. Now, this isn't concrete proof, but when you add it to everything else, it's a piece of the puzzle. And I already knew they faked the moon landing. Nevertheless, when you see something like this, I had other podcasters call me up, is this real? I said, yeah. I didn't realize the magnitude of this. To me, it was just one other piece of evidence on the pile. So when I uploaded it to the internet, I thought, no big deal. But it went viral, and YouTube throttled it. It was doubling in views for the first 3 days, and then it stopped. They didn't want the information getting out. And so that's the issue. Only one can be true. Either the general with top secret clearance is lying or the sergeant is lying. Now, we did a Freedom of Information Act on Cyrus Eugene Acres, and the United States Air Force claims there was no one by that name in the United States Air Force. And yet, not too far from here, about 50 miles away, we visited the military cemetery where the son said his dad was buried, and there's his tombstone. And it says United States Air Force on it. Served in Vietnam, served in Korea. So wiping a guy's file away and them officially claiming no one by that name was in the Air Force, and then finding his grave in a military cemetery, that's a big contradiction. Why are they destroying the guy's file? And then after he talked to me, about 2 days later, his house was broken into while he was out. He had a security password. Somehow they overrode that. They stole everything having to do with his father. And then a couple of good guys in government asked me to call two people on that list. One I had heard of, one I hadn't heard of. And they didn't tell me why, but as best as I can figure, they wanted to trace their reaction, like good guy, bad guy spies in the same government, like a civil war or something. And so 2 days after I called two people, one of which was Eugene Krantz, the CIA shows up at this guy's house and threatens to kill him if he talks, and his family, if he talks to me again. The United States Senate Intelligence Committee investigated this and gave the guy whistleblower protection through the FBI. Now, why would they do that if they really went to the moon? Right? So, and then I interviewed the widow and son of the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon before Neil Armstrong. He was the most beloved astronaut. His name was Gus Grissom. He had an accident with his Mercury capsule. It hit the ocean hard. The explosive bolts were triggered. The door went off. It bobbed under, started filling up with water. And it was considered an embarrassment because, like the last mission, the guy got a personal medal from Kennedy, and now we have this mishap. It was like no publicity or whatever. They still had a press conference about it. And they had found out, or he confessed, that he had in his pockets, bank rolls of nickels. He had like 6 in one pocket, 6 in the other, so he could give to his son, to give to his elementary school chums, and say this nickel's been in outer space. And he admitted that, when he started sinking to the bottom of the ocean with all this extra weight in his pockets, maybe that wasn't such a bright idea. And the press corps and the audience just laughed and it endeared them. And then one reporter asked him, "Were you afraid?" And he said, "Of course I was afraid." And his humanity made him the number one choice, the number one PR choice for the first man to walk on the moon. But he couldn't believe that they were going to go in 2 years. One of his last words were during the test, he was talking from one building to the one next door through a wired intercom, and it wouldn't work. He said, "How are we going to go to the moon if we can't talk between two buildings?" And in my film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, that's on the homepage of Sibrel.com, the narrator doesn't point it out, but somewhere in there, Neil Armstrong is rehearsing picking up the first rock sample 6 weeks before going to the moon with like a pole and a bag on it. And the bag breaks off. They can't get that to work. And so Gus saw all of this, and I interviewed his widow for 4 hours. She told me that on January 26, 1967, he phoned her from NASA and said, "Hon, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad today inspecting the equipment." The very next day, he was killed by faulty equipment because days earlier, he had put a rocket, at the top of the rocket hung a lemon the size of a grapefruit and invited reporters to take a picture of it, calling the moon rocket a lemon. He was a boat rocker. He actually got Secret Service protection. They evacuated him from his house because of the death threats from the government. And then he died. According to his son, which we have a clip of, I think this is D3, his son says the CIA was involved. His widow says the CIA was involved. So why is the CIA killing Apollo astronauts? Why is the CIA threatening my source? And as you know, we left a hot mic in an Apollo astronaut's house where I showed him the footage that they were faking part of the mission. And he and his son are talking about calling the CIA to have me killed, which obviously wouldn't be necessary if they really went to the moon. So if you want, you can show clip D3.
I think it was intentionally sabotaged by someone. It's been a question in my mind, what was found in the accident investigation and how was that handled? Was the CIA involved or whoever? But it was done intentionally.
So they made it look like an accident, and they burned 2 other people alive with him so it wouldn't look like they were singling him out because he wouldn't cooperate. The guy was literally in a safe house with Secret Service protection the day before he was murdered. That's how serious it was. And if you want, you can go to D4. It's like a 5-second clip of the hot mic of the astronaut's son talking about calling the CIA to have me killed after I exposed the moon landing fraud in the astronaut's house. That's D4.
You want to call the CIA? Have them whacked.
So why would the CIA be doing all this stuff if the moon landings are real? And then if you want to play D5, you're going to see there were many more deaths than people know about. This is about a 30-second clip.
But Grissom wasn't the only Apollo critic to meet with a suspicious and untimely death. Thomas Ronald Barron was a safety inspector during Apollo 1's construction. After the fire, Barron testified before Congress that the Apollo program was in such disarray that the United States would never make it to the moon. Then exactly 1 week after he testified, Barron's car was struck by a train. But the Apollo program continued. And so did the string of untimely deaths. Between 1964 and 1967, a total of 10 astronauts lost their lives in freak accidents. These deaths accounted for an astonishing 15% of NASA's astronaut corps.
To keep something that's alive wrapped up and covered over, you've got to eliminate all the people that can talk about it.
So, Matt, if 15% of your staff here died within a 3-year period, I think the homicide detectives would be all over the place.
Is that real? Can Ryan, can you try to keep up a little bit and maybe get some checks on this, and let's just see what chat says about it. So
yeah, that's a report by Fox News.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they know how to count and divide and make a percentage. But
Right. So 15% of how many?
This includes backup crews.
Backup crews.
Yeah.
And so why kill all these people?
They wouldn't cooperate. Same reason with Gus Grissom. He would not cooperate with the fraud. He thought it was morally wrong. So he wouldn't do it. And neither would the other 10 people that they killed. The other guy was a critic. He was a whistleblower at Rocketdyne. And after he testified to Congress that they're never going to make it to the moon with this technology, they killed him 1 week later. Back before DNA testing, what they would do is the CIA would kill you at one location, put you in a car, put the car on a train track, so it would destroy all the forensic evidence.
How many total astronauts were killed that were part of the Apollo program? 8 were killed. 1 on a fire on a launch pad in 1967. The 3 astronauts died during the ground tests were right. So those are the 3 there. The other Apollo Air astronauts were killed in training or aircraft accidents. These astronauts were members of the Apollo astronaut corps. Okay, so 64, 66, 66, 67, 67, crash.
Yeah, so they're all mechanical failures of machines that can easily be tampered with. And that's what Betty told me, that the Apollo craft was rigged to have a fire. They reversed the door the day before so that it opened inwardly instead of outward. They sealed it with 100% oxygen, which makes steel wool flammable. They found oily rags under his chair. They found a device that was not part of the spacecraft that was there to cause a spark. And so this is really the sad part, and we haven't even gotten really to the proof of the fraud yet, but we're about to, that our country was founded, and its first document wasn't really the Constitution, it's the Declaration of Independence. And it said that when any government becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. That includes us and now. So we have proof that the federal government is killing their own people, or even planning. You know, if you just plan to kill me, that's attempted murder. You go to jail. Operation Northwoods show they were planning to kill Americans. Why didn't all the staff at the Pentagon go to jail, right?
So this is saying, go up to the top, Ryan, this is saying that, so what caused the Apollo 1 fire? So this is where the 3 astronauts were burned inside, supposedly by by accident. A pure oxygen at very high pressure, of course, is why they burn. So there are flammable materials everywhere. So NASA didn't realize that they shouldn't have Velcro, nylon nets, resin.
Well, they knew not to do 100%
foam wiring,
oxygen
insulation,
either.
and plastic tubing. So NASA didn't realize that you shouldn't put these.
No, they knew it.
These
They
types
just did
of
it anyway
materials.
because they were trying to kill him.
Right. So faulty, worn, or exposed wiring. The most likely ignition source was a spark from frayed or damaged wiring beneath Gus's seat, just like you said, and a hatch that could not be opened in time, so they couldn't, right, which we know, test environment not designed for safety. The test was not a static oxygen test conducted with power on in a cabin full of unreviewed materials without fire suits or emergency oxygen for the crew. So how stupid do you have to be? If your only job is to keep people safe within this capsule, as NASA, how stupid do you have to be to pressurize that much oxygen, put all this flammable material within this capsule? It's like either complete gross negligence of a bunch of monkeys that have no idea what they're doing, or it was intentional, right?
Exactly. And they're not stupid. It was intentional.